All right, let's jump right in. We're going to go back in time to 1976 to unpack a really powerful sermon by Reverend Sun Myung Moon. It painted this picture of incredible cosmic urgency, basically framing that specific moment in history as humanity's last shot. And boom, right out of the gate, you get this. This sets the tone for everything. This isn't some polite suggestion, you know? It's framed as a final, urgent alarm bell for the entire world, both good and evil, and it's delivered with total conviction. So let's picture the scene. The place is specific, Belvedere, New York. And the date is significant too. It's the last Sunday of 1976, America's bicentennial year. The whole country's been looking back at its 200-year history, wondering what's next. And it's right here, in this moment of reflection, that this vision for the world's next chapter is laid out. Okay, so to really get why this was called a final warning, we have to understand the problem he's laying out. And it's a big one. The sermon starts by outlining this fundamental conflict that, he argues, is at the very heart of the human condition. The idea here is that every single one of us is caught in a cosmic tug-of-war. On one side, you've got your internal spiritual world, your conscience, your spirit, that's always pulling you toward God. But on the other side, you've got the external physical world, which the sermon says is dominated by Satan and is constantly yanking you in the opposite direction. And get this, it's not an even fight, not even close. The sermon calls it a staggering contrast. The external world, everything we see, hear, and touch every day, has this massive, almost total grip on our lives. Meanwhile, the influence of the spiritual world, it's shown as just this tiny sliver in comparison. So, you gotta ask the question, right? If the scales are tipped that much, how has goodness even survived? Why wasn't it just completely wiped out ages ago? Well, the text says it's because a special, focused power from God has been precisely helping the side of goodness, just enough to keep it in the fight. So, that's the problem. A huge, lopsided cosmic battle. So, what's the solution? How do you win this thing? Well, the sermon lays out a very specific path, a kind of roadmap for how an individual can overcome this division. And the key, the secret weapon in all this, is the conscience. It's described as something we're all born with, a universal trait. It's like an internal magnet, you know? No matter what's happening externally, it's always creating this vertical pull, always striving upward, always trying to point you toward God. And this path has actual concrete steps. First, you hold an ideal in your mind. Second, your body has to act on that ideal, performing noble deeds. The whole goal is to get your mind and your body to finally stop fighting and work together, to get them perfectly aligned so you can move toward that center point. And this central point is the finish line. It's a state of complete union, where the distance between you and God just disappears. According to the sermon, once you reach that point, you come under God's direct control, and you can never stray again. You're locked in. But, and this is a really big but, this journey is anything but easy. The sermon introduces a major obstacle, a real curveball. The path actually gets more difficult the closer you get to the goal. Yeah, the text asks this question directly, and it's a fascinating thing to think about. Your first instinct might be to say, easier, of course, you can see the finish line. But that's not the answer we get here. To explain this, the sermon uses this brilliant analogy of a stretching rubber band. The journey is like pulling a rubber band farther and farther. You know that feeling. The more you stretch it, the more tension builds up and the more energy it takes to pull it even one more inch. And this is where the stakes get incredibly high. Think about what happens when you let go. If you let it go and it's only stretched a little, no big deal. But if you've stretched that thing to its absolute limit, and then you fail, the snapback is immense. The failure is catastrophic. So, all of this brings us to the sermon's climax. The argument is that all of human history, this entire collective stretching of the rubber band, has led to this one, single, do-or-die moment of crisis. The sermon looks back at history as this string of heartbreaking near misses. Time and again, God's plan was derailed by what seemed like small mistakes at the worst possible moments. From Cain and Abel to Noah, all the way to Jesus, where it cites John the Baptist's hesitation as a little thing that led to a gigantic failure. So, because of this whole history of failures, the sermon frames its own time, the end of 1976, as something totally different. It's not just another crisis, it is a total emergency. And this quote just hammers that point home. It's not just humanity's emergency. This is presented as God's greatest emergency, the one single moment in all of history when everything is on the line. And if the rubber band analogy didn't get the point across, here is another one. The world is a bomb, the fuse is lit, and it's in the wrong place. And there is only one chance to move it to safety before it detonates. There is absolutely no time for hesitation. Okay, so the stakes couldn't possibly be higher. So what does victory look like? What happens if this final push succeeds? The end of the sermon shifts from the crisis to this really tangible, worldwide vision of the future. And it gets incredibly specific. This isn't some vague, far-off event. This final emergency has a deadline. The sermon declares the next 4 years, from 1977 to 1980, as the decisive period. That's the window. And just listen to the scale of the vision for what could be done in that time. It's staggering. We're talking concrete plans for daily newspapers in New York, Tokyo, and London, a university in America, an opera house, even a fleet of 747 airplanes. This wasn't just a spiritual idea, it was a plan for a physical, global transformation. And the ultimate result of all that effort? A complete reorientation of everything. The sermon promises a future where spiritual reality is so obvious, so in your face, that God's existence would be as undeniable as the sun in the sky. And so, this whole incredible message of cosmic struggle, of an arduous journey, of an ultimate emergency, it doesn't end with a statement. It ends with a challenge. A direct, personal, action-oriented question to every single person listening. Given everything that's at stake, are you ready to run?